Hi, everybody. Right, we're back in for the afternoon session, and I'm looking forward to listening to Rosemary's talk. I'll give you the title of the talk in a minute. Um, Sorry, there was a couple of issues this morning with regards to connectivity, and I think we've sorted most of those out. But we will, and we have done actually recorded most of the presentations. So we'll forward on the presentations that we couldn't get to this morning, but I think there was only one stroke two. But I don't, hopefully, touching wood, because I've got a solid oak desk. We won't have those problems. And Rosemary's actually recorded this talk, which we'll deliver as a recording just in case she disappears off into the internet wilderness. Anyway, let me introduce you properly, Rosemary, and I'm really quite interested in your talk this afternoon. It's something that the title reminds me of the first gig I went to when I was a youth. That gives away my age a little bit, doesn't it? But let me just give you. Let me introduce you, Rosemary. So Rosemary Horry is our next presenter. Rosemary is a senior lecturer at the University of Derby. She has taught environmental management in higher education settings for about 20 years. A fellow of the Institute of Environmental Management and an assessment. She has been chair of the Midlands region of IEMA for around 13 years. Recognition of her standing in this field has resulted in her being made an honorary fellow at the Environmental Association of Universities and Colleges. Her research interests focus chiefly on how businesses can make a positive contribution to the environment, particularly through the use of ISO 14001. Over the last 6 years, she's implemented an environmental management system at the University of Derby, has chaired the university's Fair Trade Group, leading them to gain a one-star award, has pushed for responsible futures to be adopted on campus. In the last couple of years, much of her work has focused on been on helping SMEs in Derby and Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire regions to decarbonise their practices. I think that was the Decarbonise project, of which she actually was recognised from an EAOC Green Gown Awards in 2022. I believe I remember the Decarbonise project. It was one of the larger ERDF programs that were actually ongoing. I think it was a 6-year program. She firmly believes that the companies can have significant positive impacts in protecting the environment and contributing to society. So Rosemary's keynote talk is entitled "One Step Beyond. It would be madness not to engage with sustainability." I remember when One Step Beyond the album came out, and I actually went to see Madness in Cardiff in, I think it was 80 or 81 during the time that it came out. So I have fond memories. So I'm really looking forward to your talk, Rosemary. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Darryl. I would just like to thank the University of Suffolk, Loughborough University and the University of West of England for the opportunity to come and talk to you today at the International Sustainable Ecological Engineering Design for Society SEEDS Conference 2023. Hi, my name is Rosemary Horry. I'm a senior lecturer at the University of Derby, chartered environmentalist, fellow of the Institute of Environmental Management and Assessment, and honorary fellow of the Environmental Association of Universities and Colleges. And my title for my presentation is One Step Beyond. It would be madness not to engage with sustainability. So in deference to SUGS, I would like to say thank you for the title, and we'll now continue with the next slide. Why do we need environmental management systems? Well, I've spoken about the need for sustainability and the need to look at that issue. So environmental management systems are a step in that journey. The fundamentals of ISO 14001 are that it prevents pollution, it enables organisations to comply with legislation, and that they should continually improve. So those are the first 3 points. But actually, it also enables them to actively consider the impacts they're having on the environment through their operations, be that the sourcing of materials or the actual production process, or even the transport of those materials to the end user. And it also, through those mechanisms and the analysis of the impacts they're having, enables them to produce procedures which ensure that their operations are safe. So therefore preventing further pollution and preventing incidents such as, for example, Buncefield or 3 Mile Island or Chernobyl, because those mechanisms are in place and enable us to look at what's going on within a system, within an organisation, to see where the breakpoints might be. So how does an EMS work? Well, basically, it's a management system. So you start off by assessing what's going on within the organisation, and that's part of the planning process. From that planning process, then you put mechanisms in place. Now that might be your procedures, it might be a policy, and that's the do part. And that helps to support the delivery of an environmental management system. But throughout that process, you need to consider the needs and expectations of your interested parties. And they could be people such as the government or investors, the local community. They're all going to have their own interests. And then you check how your system is going on. Are you doing what you said you were going to do, basically? And that's the auditing process. From there, you can then act on the information gained from the audit to feed back into the planning part and actually improve the system and improve your performance, taking into account obviously any internal or external issues, which could be things such as a local nature reserve, or it could be a lack of knowledge within your workforce. All these things have to be considered, but that's basically how an EMS works. Now, in terms of uptake across the years of environmental management systems, particularly here thinking about ISO 14001, you can see, not very clearly I admit on these graphs, but you can see that there's an increase from the first year that it was really considered in this data of 1999 to 2016. There's an increase, and if you look, the green is East Asia and the Pacific, and the blue is Europe. So you can see that while other areas have increased, the biggest increases can be seen in those particular locations. And then if we look at table 2, the number of certifications in the construction sector, again, while there are a couple of dips in 2008 and 2012, the increase is still steadily an upward trend. So it's interesting to see that the construction sector has taken this on board and is utilising it as a means of managing their environmental impact. Now, throughout my research, we've looked at numerous factors, and the one that I guess we started with really was the literature review, which is always a good place to start. So we looked to ascertain what other research had discovered over the years. And through that, we came out with the most frequently reported benefits and barriers. And this, as you can see, the citation can be found in a paper produced in 2023, which has been accepted. So if we look at the benefits, firstly, improved environmental performance. Well, if you remember back to the earlier slide, improved environmental performance was one of the criteria, this idea of constant improvement. So you'd expect that to be a barrier. Cost reduction is an interesting one. And if we look at the barriers, cost is listed as the major barrier. So we've got cost against cost reduction. So there's a cost benefit going on here as to how much it costs against how much it's going to save you. And that saving could be in terms of reduced energy use, less waste produced and therefore less waste to be removed from site, fewer raw materials being purchased because you're using those materials you have more effectively. Then we've got this idea of enriched corporate and public image, which is something that I think has become more fundamental to organisations, particularly in this day of social media, where organisations can be victim to social media, where a trend starts and their image is basically wrecked in the social media world. So they are acutely aware of that. Compliance with regulations, mentioned that. That was one of the things that was noted as a requirement of 14001. Competitive advantage, as you can see, all those things. And again, we've got improved environmental performance, but we've also got protecting the environment down at number 8. Employee environmental awareness. But again, you've got to weigh that up against one of the barriers, which is the idea of lack of expertise, lack of training, lack of employee involvement. So there is this careful balance between the two. And what we've discovered is that for a company initially starting out on this journey, these barriers can be quite significant. But as companies progress, and many of the companies that we've worked with on this research have been using an EMS for many, many years. So some of those barriers that were initially there no longer exist. They've got the training, they've got the expertise, they've got the employee involvement, their documentation's been nailed, it's all been done. So we're finding that initially the barriers are very significant, but as companies get more involved with their EMS and what it can do for them, the benefits significantly outweigh those barriers. In terms of methodologies that we've used, well, a wide range of methods, far too many to go into in a short presentation. Mixed method design, so we've used both qualitative and quantitative instruments. We've gone from questionnaires, which are quantitatively driven, through to phenomenological work, where obviously it is much more qualitative because we're looking at that lived experience. And all of them have their own pros and cons in many respects. For the gaining of an understanding, I think the qualitative is a requirement. We need to delve deeper into what it is that makes these systems work or not work. And to gain that understanding, you need to have that conversation. But it does mean that obviously you're limited in the amount of professionals you can deal with. Throughout the work, we have used industry professionals. They had to be people who knew about architecture, engineering and construction, but also people who knew environmental management. And we validated our work. So we would, for example, with the Delphi, where we'd produced the information, we then took it out to a group of industry professionals to say, is this what you agree with? Do you agree with this? Do you agree with our findings? So that we had that validation from the industry and the sectors. In terms of insight from the UK, following Shen and Tam's work, which was fundamental in setting up this idea of the benefits and barriers of 14001, we used questionnaires because it was relatively easy to do, and we got quite a large number of responses. From the detailed statistical analysis, we found that cost reduction was a major driving factor, but that from the contractor's viewpoint, the greatest benefit is that reduction in the impact on the environment, which again goes with this idea of corporate image, social responsibility, which is great to see. It's great to see that contractors are actually thinking about this, and it is not just down to cost. The findings that internal and external barriers, that cost benefit, were an issue, and they were a deciding factor in whether companies actually went forward with an EMS. But waste minimisation, again, at the design stage, was viewed as being extremely important. So all these things feed into whether a company will engage with EMS. And it's how you get past that in terms of encouraging companies to engage, that really is, I think, the key to enabling more companies to be successful in their reduction of their environmental footprint, but also the drive towards sustainability. It does show, and in this paper we certainly discovered this, that short-term profits are normally considered more important than long-term gains, and that is a concern because that's how everybody seems to operate. Governments operate on a sort of a 4-year plan. We're not talking 4 years here, we're talking the sustainability of the planet. We have to look long-term. We have to break away from this next year's budget or the year after's budget. We have to look at what does the future look like. We've seen throughout this year the disasters that have appeared across all continents in terms of wildfires, of floods, devastation. We cannot take a short-term view of this any longer. But due to that, this idea of short-term profits are being more important. EMS might not be the panacea unless we can change people's views and opinions. Now, we also did a Delphi study, and that aimed to look at an expert panel and what they considered to be important. We asked them to look at 145 statements, which comprised of 86 benefits and 59 barriers. So you can see that the 10 are just the top ones. There are numerous benefits and barriers that have been cited in literature across 17 categories. And for more information, the citation is at the bottom of the slide. The highest ranked benefits in this: improve relationships with stakeholders. Tender requirements were starting to come out. Now this, it has to be remembered, is a 2023 paper, so it's not considering all those opinions from 1999 to the present. We are looking at what industry professionals think now. So this idea of improved relationships with stakeholders and tender requirements and community participation and industry standards have become more important, which shows there is a shift potentially within the sector, showing that more stakeholder opinions are being taken into consideration. Highest ranked barriers are that it's open to public scrutiny. We've still seen costs up there, but public scrutiny, this idea of social media pressure and what the public think. So it's interesting that we've had a shift. If we continue to the phenomenological study, which is about the lived experience. So this was done with professionals who are working as environmental managers or sustainability directors within the AEC sector in the UK. They believed that 14001 wasn't just a business tool, that it opened doors for business accruement. It wasn't just a badge, but a modern day necessity. And we've seen that with the idea that it's required for tender schemes. But some of those companies who are issuing the tenders might not have 14001 themselves. And that brings into question, are they doing it because it's the right thing to do? And then it appears that they're employing people who are responsible in terms of the environment. Or do they truly believe? And if they truly believe, why are they not managing their environmental impacts? So based on this, and contrary to previous studies, we've seen that EMS is chiefly implemented to save costs and comply with legislation, and potentially box ticking as part of the tender process is now a major motivation. So we've moved away from this idea of saving costs and complying to we need it for a tender. So it's an interesting shift, but is it still just that tick box exercise? Certainly with the companies that were interviewed, no, it's not. They have had EMS in place for a long time and they really believe in it. So it's interesting to see, but there are concerns that some companies are still using it just for environment. They're not looking in terms of their ambition of the sustainability. And the fear seems to be that they might not deliver on those targets, and therefore they might get penalised in the audit, the external audit, with their assessors. And that needs to be broken down, because the whole idea is that you try to improve. You don't guarantee you're going to deliver, but you're working towards something. You're going one step beyond the norm. You're pushing the boundaries to improve society, to improve your business performance, to improve the community you're working in. So it's about pushing that. And that leads us on to the roadmap that we developed. This was done to look at the benefits and barriers of 14,001 and how that could be helped or utilised, probably is a better word, to deliver on the sustainable development goals. As you can see, the sustainable development goals are icons across the top and then colour coded. Green is for short-term quick wins, the blue is medium term, and the grey is more long-term. So we mapped this across the benefits and barriers to show that these are things that companies can do quickly and easily and help deliver on the SDGs, which again, they can put out into the public domain, they can share with their stakeholders to say, look at what we're doing, look at how responsible we are, look at what we're delivering for the community, our country, the globe. So they're really hard to read on this, but if you'd like a copy of the roadmap, feel free to email me and I can send you out a copy of the roadmap, or go and read the paper. So I won't dwell on this one. It is just a continuation of the sub-benefits and how we mapped them. This again was validated with industry professionals to say, do you think this is accurate? Is it valid? Do you think it would work? And it was a yes. They did think it was usable. So in terms of conclusions and recommendations, this work, and it is ongoing, it's not finished by any stretch of the imagination, has noted opportunities for improvement in the way that 14,001 encourages organisations to work, I've doubled up my words there, apologies, towards being sustainable for society. But there are issues in relation to the exclusion of construction sites from the EMSs. We've noted that a lot of construction companies focus on their offices and their transport, but not the site itself. And that's a problem, we feel, because that's where most of their issue is going to be. It's when they're building those sites, when they're compacting the soil, when they're having runoff from the sites. And excluding that and not putting it in an EMS, we feel is a bit of a flaw. So recommendations moving forward is that an EMS should be used by an AEC organisation, and it should have the construction site, and then it could be handed over to the customer as a system. Here's your system, here's how we started it. You've got the building, you've got the site, you can take it on from here. It's recommended that all those requiring their suppliers to have 14,001 should also engage with the system. Not do as I say, not as I do, actually do as I say, and we're doing it as well. And future research should be used to examine the barriers to using 14,001 for more sustainably focused objectives. And that probably needs to be discussed with the likes of BSI, LRQA, the auditing companies. So here's the references, if anybody wants to follow up on them. And I'd just like to say thank you for listening. If you have any questions, my name's Rosemary Horry. That's my email at Derby, and I'm happy to have discussions about any potential collaborations or replication of similar studies on EMS in any other countries. So thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Rosemary. Now, we've got a few minutes for questions, and hopefully we've got Rosemary in the room.
You do?
Hopefully your internet will stay strong. I've got a question from Chris straight away. Chris Course.
Hi, sorry, that excellent, Rosemary. I really enjoyed listening to that, and I do like the detail that you've managed to capture in your roadmap. I think, you know, like I was really impressed with what you've done. There's a level below the roadmap that at the moment concerns me when I'm looking at sort of the challenges of mapping out sustainability, and that is that's the performance of some of the systems and the data that we have on materials and processes and how they work. And at one level, I think that we lack the data and information on new products. But then when we come to recycled products, I think we're really lost. And when we look at circularity and reusing and downgrading the performance of materials to a sort of a you know, if we're recycling something and the performance does happen to drop, getting those to a level where people are accepting them and using them, and they're probably paying a premium for that, and they're not actually performing as well. And I'm kind of wondering how we get over that next challenge of reusing and understanding the properties of the products that we're producing in a way that gives us the golden thread that everybody's saying that we should have, and gives us a golden thread in sustainability as well as the performance of materials. I hope you can sort of untangle that question or that point there, but I was really interested in what you were saying.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because, you know, recycling material is a challenge, and yes, there may be reductions in the performance afterwards, but I always think back, the way back in my past, in my history, I worked for a bearing manufacturer back in the dim and distant days, and we dealt with Xerox, and Xerox were taking back their components and their machines way back. We're talking probably late 80s, and they were reusing components then. It's been done over a long time period. I think possibly we went through a bit of a phase where everything was throwaway, and that's a societal issue, and we're all guilty of it. You know, I will find things in the back of the fridge and go, oh, I've totally forgotten about that. I think we need to change how we look at materials, how we value materials, how we value resources, and I think that how it's driven, maybe it needs to be a sort of two-pronged approach, that the public need to say, no, we want more recycled materials, and the governments have to step in and go, come on guys, you've got to do something about this. It's a huge challenge, and it's one that we have to attack on numerous fronts. You know, academia has a part to play in terms of looking at the data, looking at where the gaps are, but I totally agree. You know, there are so many issues. Calculations of scope 3 emissions are a nightmare, because who's counting them? Who's registering it on their documents? Are we double counting, triple counting? Who knows? But we have to get our heads around this. So lots of work for academics, Chris.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Really, really good presentation. But no, like we'll chat again at some other time. But brilliant. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
There are no other hands up at the moment, which actually is great in one way, Rosemary, but not in another, because we've got to go into the next session, which is at 13:45. So we finished perfectly on time. But excellent. We are there. If you're sticking around for the rest of the afternoon, we have got some time this afternoon that we could go into one of the breakout rooms and people might want to ask you other questions. I wouldn't mind having a conversation with you, because I've been involved in a couple of really large ERDF programs and dealing with large amounts of SMEs and looking at the non-technical barriers that they find, which are the bigger problem rather than the technical barriers, in terms of actually dealing with EMS for the future. But that's something we can just discuss later. Right, thank you everybody. We're into 3 more rooms now. If you'd like to take the pick of the presentations, please go ahead. I look forward to seeing you later. Cheers, bye.